I consider myself a product person that can code a little bit more so than a coder that can build product.
A lot of people live and die by their language or their framework.
I don't really get to see like the process of what it takes to actually build a product.
It's comical, right? Because at the end of the day, you're building something and the user really could care less of like what UI framework.
In your career, if you get the opportunity to be able to bounce from project to project like that, I think you learn a ton that way as well.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. It's the classic like exposure. Well, like you don't know what's out there, right? Like the more you get exposed to, the more it's like this is cool, this is also cool. But versus if you're siloed, it's like, it's almost misleading and like frankly a little dangerous because like you learn this one thing and you'll definitely see people that are like this is the architecture and like way to build it, and it's like okay, like not really, right? Like there's no right. The architecture. It's very subjective. It's very what I'll call like flexible based on what needs there are, and they constantly change. So I 100% agree with that. Exposure is key, especially earlier. And I would even say like even like myself now, like there's a ton of stuff out there, and like the pace that Apple keeps pushing stuff, there will always be a ton of stuff out there.
And especially like the larger the company, you have to support all the way back to like iOS 6. And that's an exaggeration, of course, but you know what I'm saying. It's like, so you don't get to play with the new stuff for a while, you know?
Yeah, no, 100%. And no, it's very true. And now there's like, so it's funny, like there are some like bigger, like larger on the medium side companies that actively make it a point to share like what, that their minimum target is like higher up there. So an example I'll give is like DoorDash. DoorDash only supports iOS 14, and like when they recruit, I've got a good friend there, like they actively like make that a selling point. Like you don't need to touch iOS 7, we promise. It's interesting, right? Because like it's an active decision by like management of like, okay, we know this new stuff is going to be perhaps brittle in certain areas, or it's new, right? Like it's not like battleground tested per se, but that's kind of what you do, right? Like that's what developers love to do. And I'm generalizing, right? There probably is someone out there that loves iOS 7 and supporting it. Maybe, I don't want to discount anybody, but
the good thing about iOS though, and this is for people that are maybe just getting started in this world, is that iOS users typically adopt the latest pretty quickly. Like if you look at like the mixed panel trends, like usually by about a year after like iOS 15 is released, like 98% are on at least iOS 14, the 98 is probably pretty high, but the only thing is like when you're at a company like Microsoft, okay, if only 3% of your users are on iOS 14 or less, that's still a hell of a lot of users,
And the other thing like that's specific to some of these companies, before we segue, is it depends on the nature of the business, right? So like Microsoft is very enterprise, right? Like the US government being, let's say, a customer, hypothetically speaking, right? Like they might have some compliance reason to be in an older version, right? Like not every company is on the latest by either virtue of hardware limitations, right? It's expensive to buy 100,000 employees the latest iPhones, right? Yeah. So, there are reasons where perhaps a company doesn't want to, but is required to per like arbitrary contract signed 10 years ago. So what are your thoughts, transitioning a little bit? So we talked about indie dev, we talked about careers, we talked about kind of being a product person. What are your thoughts about like there's a lot of schools of thought in terms of where to go, right? There's a lot of things you can do, and it's pretty overwhelming, like tutorial hell, right? Like someone that's brand new and they start getting exposed to a lot of material and content, startup they can go to and learn, right? Really quick, a lot of impact. Big tech, maybe a little more difficult, more bureaucratic. Like what do you do with all that info? Like it depends, of course, but I don't know. What do you do?
So in the ideal scenario, and I'll explain why I say ideal scenario, is we kind of touched on it. I think you should taste a little bit of each one. Taste a small startup, taste a development agency, taste a big company. And why I said in an ideal scenario is like, you got to be able to get hired at these places, right? Because a lot of times when you're breaking into the industry, you're like, I'll take whatever the hell I can get. You know what I mean? I know it took me 60 interviews to get like my first job, and I've heard horror stories of people like more and more. So I know you're pretty desperate to get that first job. The good news for anybody that's in this situation is once you get the first one, the rest are pretty easy. Easy relative to the first one. So yeah, I would say in a perfect world, like, and that's again, just general life advice, taste a lot, like you said, get a lot of exposure early in your career, and then you'll have a, more informed decision. Because like you said, it depends on like what you like to do. And that's what I love about software development. You can make it do whatever you want to do, right? You want to travel the world, be a digital nomad, you can do it.
I completely agree, right? Like dip your toes in everything and you'll find like which part you want to jump into or maybe you don't find that part. Maybe you find that you hate all of it and it absolutely sucks, and product design is your kind of your forte, and you switch over to Figma and you go nuts over there. So, and I actually know people that have done that, right? Like software is really interesting, right? Like it's so one thing which I think is slightly especially nowadays, like things are hyped up to be this like glamour, like like the tech scene, but tech is definitely not for everyone, right? Like there's this big mantra, especially here on YouTube, right? Everyone should learn to code. I'm a firm believer everyone should not learn to code. Like absolutely not. That's not good advice. I don't know what your thoughts on that are. Like I
think everyone should learn to code to a degree, right? I think, again, just general life advice, I think coding teaches you great problem solving and thinking through like edge cases or various scenarios. So just general life advice, I think it makes you a better thinker and better problem solver. So learning to code doesn't require you to go all the way up to being job ready, hireable, right? But even just learning like basic programming, I think, especially like obviously the world's not going backwards technologically, it's only going forwards, right? So I think learning, even if it's just like the kindergarten level of code, you know what I mean? I think can be super valuable. But I do agree with you. Not everyone should get all the way up to job ready. Like that's probably a bit much. But yeah, I think there's some valuable just general life skills to be had there.
Yeah, I say for me, like the biggest one is like creativity, right? Like you learn how to be creative, and you also learn, you learn to learn, right? Like you learn how to think, which sounds really trivial and like common sense, but I think the most common of sense is not common sense. But right. I completely agree.
Let me expand on what you said about the creativity thing, because that's an interesting story that I had. Like I don't know who all knows my story. Real quick, I didn't write my first line of code till I was 32 years old. So, and again, I was just like YouTube and stuff, online courses, right? Exactly the people I teach is my path. And I think that's why I resonate with a lot of people. It's because I remember what it was like to be YouTube and all this stuff. But anyway, I always consider myself like a spreadsheet, numbers person, math. I never really consider myself like an artsy, creative person. That all changed when I learned how to code, and like having these ideas and, making it appear on the screen, and then like creatively solving a problem. Like I had this like creative explosion in my early 30s, all because I learned how to code. So like when you said like, you have to be creative, I think most people don't think as a coder, as a creative person that's not familiar with the industry. So I think that was a big surprise for me. And yeah, like I said, it unlocked a huge creativity, and that was probably one of the best things that happened to me in life, to be honest with you.
And even like myself, right? Like I think some people, when they look at like, I don't know about you, but like I remember like now, like way back when I didn't have the appreciation for like animations and like shadows and some button looking like it's floating, right? And like now when you look at apps, especially knowing how like the amount of effort and craftsmanship that goes into this thing, and like the value that someone sat and like built it out and designed it, you get a whole different sense of appreciation for that thing. And taking that one step further, you can now do it yourself. So I don't know about you, but like sometimes I'll like go looking for a design for something, and like I'll stumble on like Dribble, and like 20 minutes later it's like, okay, these are great, but I should really go back to like doing work, because you just find like the most amazing of designs on there, and it's pretty inspiring. It sounds really cheesy, but for me, like it gives you that spark of extra creativity, and now you have coding, which is your outlet to actually build that thing.
Shifting a little bit to creative view, because you mentioned Dribble in the design process, because I get lost in Dribble all the time. So so again, back to creative view, me being like the product person, I have to invent what it does, what's the value here. Then I have to design it, make it look good. So on the design portion, when it comes to that, because I know a lot of developers think like, oh, I can never be a designer, I'm not a designer. So I think maybe sharing this process can help, because like you just steal from Dribble and cheat, right? So that's what I'll do. So it's like, I'm building a dashboard. So I'll go on Dribble, type in mobile dashboard or iPad dashboard, whatever I'm doing, and it pulls up 1,000 things. And I literally just scroll through and I screenshot, and I create I have like an inspiration folder in like my Creator View work folder. And then, it's just a bunch of dashboard inspiration or charts inspiration or whatever, right? And then I just go through and look through those, and a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I kind of like take what I like from all those designs, piece it together, and that's how I come up with my design. So like, people say, oh, Sean, you have great design skills. And I'm like, I just kind of look at other people's stuff and take what I like, leave what I don't. So I think that's a good lesson for programmers who think they can't design. I think that's a good way to at least have halfway decent designs.
Yeah, I agree, right? Good artists copy, great artists steal, right? And I think, and frankly, like, that's what a lot of coding is too, right? Like, You know, if the person who invented copy and paste had patented copy and paste, like I don't know about you, right? But there is a lot of like things are tried and done. It's very uncommon to be doing something completely novel. And there's like this weird connotation about like the word steal, right? Like at the end of the day, right, things are very similar. Put your own spin on it, be creative, but it's a really, really good place to start, right? Like you're at a jumping point versus, you know, like square one where it's like empty sheet of paper. What do I do?
Yeah, don't be worried about copying and pasting. We all do it like all the time. But like you said, it's never just like copy paste that works, cool, moving on. You know what I mean? It's like we always have to like, you know, put your own twist on it, like you said, or because it's never usually exactly what you want, unless it's like a simple one-liner, like that's different. But if it's like a whole solution, it's almost never going to be exactly what you need.
Touching more on creator review, actually, one thing that came to mind that I forgot to ask earlier is, so I know you've been sharing and documenting your whole process, right? And presumably you'll continue to do so with like sales or however much you feel comfortable. I forget the name of the app that Jordan did a write-up on that was acquired.
SpendStack.
Yes. Do you plan to do a write-up like that? Because I think it's not only incredibly valuable, but digging into raw numbers like downloads or retention and conversion, albeit very like personal and like confidential to the business.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, no, I plan on, it won't be a write-up because I don't like writing. It'll be a video. but yeah, there will be something. It might not be, well, fingers crossed, Creator View gets acquired someday, but it won't be like, I won't wait till that happens. Like I'll be sharing it like my plan is to do like monthly updates. Okay, here's how January's downloads were. Here's what revenue was in January 2023 or whatever, right? I plan on doing like monthly updates, so it won't be like all at the end. To your point, like I got to be careful on like what's confidential, what's not, especially if I'm like, hey, Google reached out to acquire, you know, I probably can't say that until, you know, it happens, right? So I will share as much as, you know, I reasonably can. There's also, yeah, I'll share it. Screw it. There's so many ulterior motives with this startup vlog. One of them is once I'm done with the Creator View, because a little more context, the reason I'm shifting away from the YouTube channel and courses into Creator View is I'm spending all this time building this course business and this YouTube business, but like the product is me, right? And after 8 years, I can't sell me, right? And make, you know, money from it. Whereas if you're building a normal business, you work on this business for however long and you have an asset you can sell, right? So that's what Creator View, the app, is. Also part of the process is post Creator View, like this is kind of like my retirement. I would like to be like a high priced consultant, not as like this is my job, this is what I have to do. Right, hopefully Creator View does well enough that like I'm done. Like I'm retired, you know? But if a cool app comes and like, hey Sean, we watched your whole Creator View journey. We know what you know. And this obviously relies on Creator View being successful, right? If Creator View is a failure, this isn't gonna work. But if Creator View does sell for, you know, huge, whatever, and I've shown the whole process, people know that I know my stuff, you know, and a cool project comes along that wants me to consult for them for, you know, a hefty sum, we'll see. So that, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that's also one of the, you know, side potential bonus paths that, like, again, back to like sharing your work, like showing that you know what you're talking about makes you valuable and people reach out to you. I'm sure you get it all the time. I get people asking me, hey, can I get 10 hours of your time? I want to know about this. And to be quite frank, at least for me, they think I know way more than I do, right? They just assume I know everything. I'm talking about like code. Like they'll come at me with some obscure framework, and I'm like, I've never even heard of that framework. Like, I don't know. You know, they just think you know everything.
No, I 100% agree. Now, you touched on a bunch of interesting things. I'll touch on that latter piece really quickly because it happens a lot. Like sharing and building in public, it builds credibility, but I also think like it gives this illusion of like there's way more there than there actually is. That's not to say there isn't a lot of value there in being shared and like presented, but you know, like it's all perspective. And I think the loudest, I don't say the loudest person in the room, but the most visible person sharing what they're doing is misconstrued to per se have way more there than's actually there. But yeah, so being a high-priced consultant, though, afterwards makes a lot of sense, right? Building a lot of credibility and, like, building a business, whether it's on YouTube or elsewhere, right? It's a lot more common than people probably think in, like, various industries because it builds that credibility not only on the technical side, but it shows that you are well-rounded in product, in marketing, in sales, in the part that's, like, oh, shit, something went wrong. I need to handle this. Like, Creator Review is trademarks, per se, by someone else. Like, how did you manage it, right? And I think getting, like, a behind-the-curtain view of that is, you know, assuring to the whoever, you know, is hiring you, like, hey, like,
yeah, like a perfect example, I'm not sure when this is going to come out, but I'm going to do a video on this as well. But like my potential co-founder that I've been working with on Creator View, Apple hired him away, right? So I lost my co-founder to Apple. So it's like, I'm going to do a video. I'm like, okay, how am I going to deal with that? I thought I had a partner here that we were working out great. It was going awesome. Shit, now I'm back on my own. Crap, do I get another co-founder? Do I try to, get funding? Like, do I just go on my own? Like, I think those problems in sharing it, sharing your thoughts and then going with your solution and then, oh crap, that solution didn't work. So I did this. Like, just sharing that process, people find, insanely valuable. And it'll lead to opportunities in the future. People will reach out to you for that knowledge.
It's funny you're competing with Apple now, huh? For talent, like that's
big time. Yeah.
Times are changing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I know we're almost at time. I don't want to take too much of your time and keep you too long. So yeah, I mean, any parting words we touched on a bunch of things here, right? So indie development, the various aspects of it, product, careers, big tech, not being too deep in the weeds of like technical and having a war on Twitter about UI Kit and Swift UI. Like what would you say to like not only like the beginner developer, but people. Actually, let me change this into a different question. I'm sure you get comments that are like 2 paragraphs long about like, hey Sean, like I have this error on this line and I did this and I followed what you did here. Can you help me? And I don't know about you, but sometimes when I see those, I will be honest and say I don't read them because they're a little long and frankly like it's not like sustainable for me to help those people. So what would you say to the people that are at some place in their journey that need help either learning to lead code and algorithms or interview prep, or people that are stuck on learning basic code? Like what's the general advice you would share?
Yeah, I mean, this may be pretty vague, but I think this is like the number one thing that separates the people that make it from the people that don't, right? Because so many people start learning how to code and give up after 2, 3, 4 months, right? You have to like embrace the suck. Like banging your head against the wall for 3 days, like is horrible. It sucks. Like we've all done it. Like I've thought about quitting so many projects because like I just can't do this. I can't do this. And then, you fight through and then you find one little thread and you start pulling on that thread and like, oh crap, you get the new error, right? Oh, this is a different error, and you start, and that's the great feeling when you finally get over that hump. And I think that's just what is appealing about the people that like programming. I think that's the appealing part. We talked about like problem solving earlier, is taking on that challenge, right? And if you're one of the types of people that just as soon as they hit a roadblock, they just like run the other direction, you're probably gonna have a bad time, So I guess I'm not trying to like dissuade people from doing it. I'm just trying to set the expectations, right? This is not easy. I think everyone that goes through this process thinks they're the only one running into these errors and these roadblocks. And it's like, no, we all did it. Some of us powered through, some of us didn't. Like I think that's the difference. So just set your expectations and be ready for that and just power through. If you really want to be a programmer.
Right. Embrace the suck. No, I love it. It's it's almost like I think it goes hand in hand with like put in the work, right? Like there's not a shortcut. And I like only if there was like something that Apple had where they could like see like every single error Xcode has ever thrown for like how many people, like people will truly see like, yeah, this like obscure error that I think I'm the only one getting has been seen by like 30,000 people before me.
Yeah.
So I completely agree, right? Like what sets people apart is how perseverant are you? How patient are you? How much time you've actually invested, effortful time, not just time for the sake of I sat in front of my computer for 3 hours but got nothing done time. Yeah. And I think that takes people very far, not only technically, but in terms of like interviewing, right? Like you said, you applied to, I think you said 60, right? Before you got your first iOS role. Like it is a grind. And once you make it.
Well, real quick, sorry to interrupt. I don't know what your experience was like, but I feel like that 60 number was on the low end. I've heard so many people say like 100, 150, 200, right? So like the reason I wanted to interject there was to be like, some people might hear 60 and be like, oh my God, that's a lot. I think that's on the low end.
It is 100% on the low end. I don't remember how many I had applied to my very first role, but it was definitely way more than I expected. Because I think I had done something like around 100 and it was like, okay, like this is nuts. Like I've done 100 applications. Like I got to get something, hear nothing back. That's like, okay, like this is a reality.
And real quick, again, for people like when I did get that job, I wasn't special because it only took me 60. They hired me for me. They did not hire me for my coding skills. Like they were like, you know what I mean? And sometimes you just have to find a situation like that where someone's like, this guy's smart, he's driven, he's passionate. Yeah, he's a beginner, doesn't really know much, but I think with our tutelage, he'll be good, right? So that's another aspect of it. When you're trying to get these jobs, it's not just about who can code the best. Some companies it is, like you just do a lead code problem and if you fail, you're out, right? So this is not a blanket statement. And I found it's usually like the earlier startups that are more willing to take the person more than their leak code answer, right?
Yeah, no, 100% agree. And actually, that's a really good note that we can wrap up on. One very brief story I'll share. I've gotten into reading a lot lately, and by reading I mean Audible, because I don't like reading that much. Listening is much better.
Right.
And I was listening to this book I'm wrapping up these days called The Happiness Factor, and they talk about like folks that go to like these like Ivy League schools for very like quote unquote prestigious disciplines, right? Law, medicine, engineering, business, like private equity, that a lot of them are like brutally unhappy, right? And I'll cut it short. And basically there was a segment they were talking about Allstate, and Allstate was hiring these like sales folks to sell insurance, and what they would see is turnover was like stupid high, something like 80% of people would quit in 6 months. And this like guy that wrote this book, this consultant, came in, and the thing that they started dividing people on is, okay, don't hire people with a spotless track record of sales or someone that you think would be a great salesperson. Hire people that take this like psychology test and show signs that they're very perseverant and positive. Because chances are, if you're really good at what you do, quote unquote, but you're a really negative person who's a pessimist who like once they hit like a roadblock, it's like, all right, I'm done. Like that's not going to work out sustainably long, right? But if you hire someone who doesn't know like jack, right? Absolutely nothing about the field or the craft or discipline, but they're willing to put in the effort, right? They're patient, they hit a roadblock, they persevere. That's going to yield you people that are not only amazing at what they do, but are very malleable to the situation, and especially in sales, right? Like very different career than like tech, but you need it, sure. Right? So I always thought that was when I was listening to that yesterday, I thought it was really interesting and very relevant to like life in general. I sound like a rapper quote right now, but but to me, like it's very true for software too. All right, Sean. No, it was great chatting. Always a pleasure. We'll probably be splitting up this video however we do on other channels. But any parting words?
I'll put a little bow on the embracing the suck thing that we talked about, because like people might be thinking, how do you break through those walls? How do I get the motivation? That's where having a project that you really want to build on your own comes into play, right? If you have this app that you always wanted to do, if you're just building random tutorials or building somebody else's app that you don't care about, those roadblocks are going to kill you, right? So that's why having that project of your own, super helpful to get through them. So yeah, that's some good way to wrap it up.
Yep, 100%. All right, everyone. So whoever hasn't dropped a like down below, don't forget to do so before clicking away. Hit subscribe if you're new here. Links down below to both of our channels, other social media. You guys know the drill. Thanks again for watching. It's been a pleasure, Sean. We will catch you guys in the next one.